The state calls Jeffrey Lacoste.
Jeffrey Lacoste, please.
There he is. Oh, Jeff, thank you for being here. No, seriously, Jeff, I mean it. Thank you, Jeff.
My name is Jeffrey Lacasse, Jeffrey Lacasse.
Thank you, Jeff.
You seem quite sincere. What's that music?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Charlie had told her that no man wants to date a single mom. So we had this conversation repeatedly. And then I show up to dinner and Charlie's dating a single mom.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so freaking scared of that T-Rex. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
An extremely contentious divorce.
Thank you, Jeff.
And Wendi Adelson drove me to Charlie Adelson's house, at which point I do recall observing that she was unusually jittery and being strange. I didn't know what to make of it at the time.
Thank you, Jeff.
She was a nervous wreck. And I actually traveled to the store to buy her, I believe, some Pepto-Bismol. She was such a nervous wreck. She was having stomach problems. So she wasn't food poisoned. She didn't have the flu. She wasn't sick. Just so
I don't remember that.
nervous that she was having stomach problems.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, you didn't go anywhere with Wendi without hearing about
No, well,
Dan Markel.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
I was kind of tired of being strung along.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, such awesome Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. You can bet that he has tons of sex. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. I'm so freaking grateful for my Jeff.
No further questions.
All right, we can release the witness. Okay, but you're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so freaking grateful for my Jeff.
Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been great, really. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming by. Thank you, 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 I keep doing this. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Happy Monday. Hope everybody is doing well. That was, of course, from the Society page, one of my favorite YouTube channels. I'm such a super fan of their work. On my community tab, I put up my favorite video that they've made, which is, of course, Wendi Adelson doesn't remember anything. She can't remember. And I think it's the most accurate reporting ever done on Wendi Adelson's testimony in any trial. But we are going to continue to look at today the testimony of Wendi Adelson in her brother Charlie Adelson's trial. So yesterday we left off with the stunning examination by the great Georgia Kappelman. I really think she's an excellent prosecutor, and I enjoy watching her try cases. Not for nothing, I've heard people discussing that the reason that Charlie Adelson did not do well is because Daniel Rashbaum, his attorney, was not from the area. He wasn't local. He's from New York. And that he was too abrasive and didn't get the local charm because, of course, Georgia Kappelman is very charming. And I would say my opinion is very different. I think that had very little to do with Charlie Adelson getting convicted. I think he got convicted because he was incredibly guilty. And if anything, his own testimony did him no favors. He was not a likable defendant. So when you only have your story, you have to be exceedingly charming and exceedingly likable. And when your defense attorney is saying in closing arguments, you don't have to like my client, which they often do for really the worst defendants, you know you're in trouble. Meaning, I really thought Daniel Rashman was going to say, I don't even like my client. And as I said yesterday, I would not be surprised if he drops him as a client. We saw him telling him in court, just stop, a lot of handing of the Post-it notes. It's clearly Charlie was in charge of his own defense. Great comments from last night's episode. And thank you everyone who subscribed, left comments. They're all so good. I just picked a few. Barbara Florence, 2286, says, the TV stayed broke for weeks. It was supposed to be used as her alibi since the first attempt in June. Jeffrey Lacoste remarked that it was unusual not to have it repaired for so long with small kids in the house. Yes. He said, it's really helpful when we're washing dishes and cleaning up to have this small TV. I was thinking about this TV. Why was it so modest for such a rich family? But like I said, I think that this TV was bought with the alibi in mind all along. And the joke seems to always go with it. Caro 1057 says Wendi has use immunity. If a person is compelled to answer in claims before answering that the answers would tend to incriminate him or her, the answers cannot be admitted in evidence against that person. There is usually an exception in the case of a prosecution for perjury. Interesting. What I'm wondering, thank you for that. And I'm going to be hopefully doing some research on immunity. And what I'm wondering is if some of the untruths that she told on the stand could undo her immunity. That's really what I'm interested in learning. If anyone knows in the audience, let me know. Would that be I would think that would be a very rare thing to do, not often done, but my understanding is that her immunity is contingent on the idea that she testified truthfully. But does it matter how big or small the lie and what it's about? That's my question. Joe Thompson says, he left a few messages. I have proof that the Adelsons are not guilty. I'm just waiting on the prosecution to embarrass themselves enough before I come forward. I found this comment so interesting. So you're waiting for everyone to get convicted before you unleash your stunning evidence to the world, so then you can try to undo all these convictions? Is that right? Or is it just Charlie? So you sat quiet through his entire trial? And does this feeling of innocence spill over to Sigfredo Garcia, Luis Rivera, Katie Magbanua? I'm confused. I think this is the most irrational move. If that is true, you should come forward right away, and certainly before Charlie Adelson was convicted. I would think you'd want to get in touch with his defense team right away, but okay. So let's get into it, shall we? So where we last left off, Georgia Kappelman had finished her amazing examination. And this is, of course, the defense's cross. So if you're Wendi, you're going to relax at this point because you know you have someone who's friendly to you asking you questions. But strangely, her demeanor doesn't change much. So I guess this is a moment where they turn the sound off.
You may examine when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Charlie Adelson is one of the most expressive defendants I have ever seen in trial. I would want to play poker against him. He tells everything with his face. So when his ex-girlfriend June walked in, he was fully manipulating her with his face. He seems to make faces at the jury to add exclamation points or question marks on things that he thinks are ridiculous or that they should take note of. I've never seen such an expressive witness. And the other times he looks like a kid with his hand caught in the cookie jar, like especially around the joke of the TV. He's like, yep, that was the plan, to have that as the alibi. Yeah, doesn't sound too good in court now.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Adelson, we've met before, right?
Yes,
We've met 2 or 3 times in our life, right?
that's correct.
We initially met in 2016 after the arrests of the killers in this case.
That's correct.
During that meeting, we had no conversation whatsoever about the substance of this case, right?
That's correct.
We met again in April of 2022 on the day that your brother was arrested, correct?
Correct.
You were at your parents' house and we were figuring out where he was, right?
That's right.
Again, nothing was discussed about the case other than his arrest.
Correct.
In fact, before right now, we have never discussed your testimony at all.
Correct.
Okay. With that in mind, let me ask you the most important question. You're aware that the state has named you as an unindicted co-conspirator in the murder of your ex-husband, right?
Correct.
They believe that you, along with your brother, along with your mom, along with your dad, conspired with those 3 killers, including Katie Magbanua. They believe you all conspired with them to kill your ex-husband. You understand that, right?
I understand that is what they believe.
So now Rashbaum is doing a little pantomime to the jury. So when he says unindicted co-conspirator, he's going to put on a face like, that's ridiculous. Because we know this was an extortion plot, according to the defense theory. So let's hear her answer.
You understand they put up a chart in their opening with pictures of all of you.
Yes, I saw the chart.
Ms. Adelson, did you have anything to do with the murder of your brother, of your ex-husband?
Absolutely not.
It's fair to say the state has it wrong.
Absolutely.
Okay, you hear that, guys? The state has it wrong. Wendi denies it. I think we could all just go home now. No more discussion is needed.
Were you in a conspiracy with any members of your family to kill Professor Markel?
No.
Okay, with that starting point, let's
get into her background a little bit. I'm going to try to skip through stuff that's already been done. Growing up, you were pretty close with your parents.
Yes.
Fair to say they were middle class?
Yes,
You went to a public high school.
I did.
You did pretty well in high school, right?
I was valedictorian.
But around a year or two before you went to college, your father was a victim of a Ponzi scheme, correct?
It was actually when I was in 8th grade.
And he lost much of his wealth.
He lost his whole life savings.
You still went to a prestigious college up in Boston, right?
I got a full scholarship.
And then when it came time to go to law school, did you pay for law school?
I got a full scholarship.
Now, you got to ask a lot of questions about divorce law in your direct examination. Are you a divorce lawyer?
I am not.
What type of law did you specialize in?
Immigration.
All those filings, and we'll get to them. Did you write those filings?
No.
So the words that Ms. Kappelman were reading, they were for you. You reviewed them, correct?
I did.
Did you draft them?
I didn't draft any pleadings.
That motion for contempt, she asked you if he could be put in jail. You have no idea, right?
I didn't remember whether that's what contempt meant, but
You were just seeking the court to.
Wait, she doesn't know what contempt means? This is so bizarre. She's a lawyer and she doesn't understand the ramifications of asking someone to be held in contempt. This is a whopper lie, in my opinion.
To enforce its previous order, right?
that's correct.
Now, remember you said that during these filings, this is the same exhibit, that you thought you talked about some other things and Ms. Kappelman said, nah, it's not in there. Remember that?
I do.
Can I borrow that binder?
So the point of this questioning is to say that Wendi wasn't being petty. It was her lawyer who cared about the tennis rackets in the divorce filing and was so vicious. It wasn't Wendi. It was just her divorce lawyer who really cared about Wendi receiving possession of the tennis rackets. Anytime you have two lawyers divorcing, it can get very ugly. I'm sure there are many lawyers who had peaceful divorces, but these are people who are very passionate, feel that they're right, and generally like to argue. So, but this is an interesting line of. It's clever to say, well, you didn't write them, you didn't type it out. She didn't type it out, certainly. She didn't draft it, but they discussed all the things that were going to go into the filing with her lawyer. Her lawyer wouldn't have known, that was my point, about the tennis rackets. Wendi didn't tell her she wanted them.
I'm going to draw your attention. This is State's Exhibit 56. I'm going to draw your attention to page 187. And I want you to read this paragraph for the jury.
Okay. The wife has been very unhappy in the marriage and filed her petition for dissolution of marriage in August 2012. The husband continues to characterize this as an abandonment of the family. At no time has the wife abandoned the children. She is divorcing the husband due to her unhappiness with him and the marriage, and she only moved out of the home because she knew the husband would not. The husband's statement of abandonment are unfounded and not supported by fact or law. He is simply having difficulty accepting her decision. In fact, he is having so much difficulty that he has told several of her colleagues and friends that she must have mental health issues.
You can stop there.
Okay.
So this is where they're going to try to make it look like Dan is so unfair to her, pointing out imaginary mental health issues. And of course, Wendi said in her podcast that Dan said that she had mental health issues because anybody who would leave him had to be crazy. So she twisted it around. But coincidentally, I started this out with Jeffrey Lacasse, the Society page's tribute to Jeff Lacasse. I think we all feel thankful to him for being so forthcoming with what he knew and such a great witness in these trials, not just this one. However, Jeff Lacasse also said that she was, as you get to know her, you find that she's really unwell. And he pointed to her drinking habits, said she drank her dinner most nights, and that he would have a small little criticism of her. One time, I think he said, well, he asked her to be more considerate of his feelings, and she broke into hysterics and crumbled into a ball on the floor. And what I've been thinking about for the past couple of days was that her practice session. Was she practicing crying hysterically? And was she seeing if he'd buy it? Obviously he did. Was that a real reaction? Obviously she wanted to manipulate him in some way with that crying, because he said he ended up apologizing to her after what he felt was her insensitive behavior to him. So I wondered if that was Wendi practicing for what she knew was coming up, which was having to cry hysterically at the police station. Let me know what you think.
Do you remember telling Ms. Kappelman that you remember filing something like that?
Yes, I do.
You can set it aside. We're going to move on. When did you meet Professor Markel?
We met in Washington, D.C. in the fall of 2004 when I went up to D.C. to interview for a job.
Where were you living?
So that is so interesting. He's asking where you met him, but I think he really means how you met him. Usually when someone asks, where did you two guys meet? You'll say, well, we were both working together. They met on J-Date, but she considers that that it doesn't help her, that people might look down on internet dating. So she's going to say, oh, we met in Washington, D.C. Yeah, they eventually met up after meeting on J-Date. So it's funny. So now the second question is where about the location, but she answers it with location. More like a question of how you met.
At the time.
I was living in Miami.
When did the relationship get serious?
Well, because it was long distance, it kind of got serious pretty quickly because it's a commitment to date someone long distance. So we started dating, and then I think over Thanksgiving, he came and spent Thanksgiving with my family. And by then it felt pretty serious.
Do you recall if you introduced him to Charlie?
I would have at that point. I don't remember introducing him before that time, but he would have met my whole family then.
What did Charlie think of Professor Markel?
I honestly don't remember his reaction, but
were they buddies?
No.
They really had nothing in common, right?
No, they had nothing in common.
Now,
I think it's something negative if she doesn't remember. They obviously didn't like each other. Obviously, Dan Markel his whole life was at least aspiring to live a moral life. And Charlie Adelson, by all accounts, is living the opposite. So it seems logical that they wouldn't like each other.
You got engaged pretty quickly. Is that fair to say?
We did. Yep.
And I think you described how you ended up in Tallahassee, how you did your last year of law school in Tallahassee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you had 2 children.
We did.
During the marriage, did Professor Markel get along with your parents?
Yep.
Now, skipping a little bit ahead, then we'll go back. Do you remember asking Ms. Kappelman asking you about your parents not liking Tallahassee and not having access to the kids in Tallahassee? Do you recall those questions?
I don't remember her asking whether my parents didn't like Tallahassee, but I remember her asking about access, like not having unfettered access to the kids.
And do you remember talking about how your parents were looking for real estate in Tallahassee?
Yeah, my parents were trying to buy a house here.
Do you recall that after you got divorced, they contacted a real estate agent named Tim Kelly to buy that house?
Yes.
During the course of your marriage, I think you said you were close to your brother, Charlie.
Yes.
How often did you speak to each other?
Maybe once a week or a couple times here and there.
Now, in all the years you lived in Tallahassee, is it fair to say that Charlie only came up 2 or 3 times?
Yeah, he came up for the birth of both boys, so definitely twice. And then I think he had an internship or a job in Alabama for a little while, so he came by then, but so maybe 3 times.
Now, you described that there came a time when you and Professor Markel started to have some marital issues.
That's right.
And some of these issues had to do with religion, correct?
Yes.
And some of them had to do with just the fact that you two were growing apart. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
But you got marriage counseling, right?
We did.
How long were you in marriage counseling for?
I think about 6 months, maybe.
Now, as close as you are with your mom, while in marriage counseling, did you tell her you were in marriage counseling?
I don't remember telling her I was in marriage counseling.
And
this I find impossible to believe. She didn't tell her meddling mother, who was involved with every step of her divorce, about the fact that she was in marriage counseling? I just find that really hard to believe.
Until the end, did Charlie know that you were in marriage counseling?
I don't know if I talked to my family about being in counseling.
Do you recall a time when you and Charlie, you were down in South Florida and you told him that you were having marital problems?
I do.
And what was Charlie's reaction to that?
I mean, he was supportive of me. I remember him saying, life is short. So if you're unhappy, then, you can make a different choice.
Do you recall a dinner at the Milk?
Life is short. If you no longer like the father of your 2 children, just make a different choice. And then when you don't win custody and get your full custody and get to move your kids to Miami, then you make a different kind of choice with your whole family. She's so unlikable. So all these questions are meant to make her likable. Her scholarship, her graduating valedictorian, her working at her marriage by going to marriage counseling. So it wasn't an easy decision for her to make, but she just removed all the furniture and took the kids when Dan was on a work trip, I believe, to New York. So that's how she decided to make a different choice.
Melting pot, where you told Charlie that you had decided to file for divorce.
I do.
And when you told Charlie that you were going to file for divorce, did he have anger and hatred towards Professor Markel?
No.
Was he sad because he knew that this was going to affect his nephews?
I don't think he was really sad. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people wondered why I got married to Danny in the first place. And my friends were very supportive when I decided to end the marriage.
See, this is something you don't expect. Even when you're divorced or you've had a difficult divorce, we don't expect to see the ex-spouse so spiteful and taking every opportunity to disparage her ex after they've been brutally murdered. We expect them to be elevated. We expect her to remember the good things. Instead, she's saying, not only was I happy I got divorced, but my friends were very supportive because they all recognized how awful he was too. So anytime she can put down Dan Markel in her testimony, she will. So she loves to really hone in and the way she delivers the line that he didn't get accepted, this Harvard educated lawyer to this, or picked for this job in Miami. She seems to relish that fact. So seems to be to enjoy his failures even after his horrendous death. And as strategic as she is, she can't help herself from doing this, from disparaging Dan Markel. So what I'm saying is she's so strategic with her testimony. She has to know comments like that do not make her look good. But just like driving by the crime scene, she can't help herself. This is a family obsessed with hating Dan Markel, according to Jeff Lacasse. And it's a family obsessed with revenge and obsessed with image and obsessed with status. So the fact that they got busted, now they haven't, she's an unindicted co-conspirator, so is her mother, Donna. And the rumor is that there may be some kind of grand jury hearing conducted this Wednesday. And we may see an arrest forthcoming in this case. My money's on Donna next. I think it's going to go down the line. You know, I'd be really surprised if they tried them together.
Now, you actually filed for divorce in September of 2012. Is that right?
That sounds right.
And when you filed for divorce, let me say this. When you left the home, I think that was discussed in the direct, Professor Markel was out of town, right?
He was. I called him and let him know that I had filed.
You're a non-confrontational person, right?
It is not my best quality, yes.
But you had been in marriage counseling for quite some time before you left the home, right?
Yes.
Before you left the home, did you have a place to live?
I did.
So there was some planning, correct?
Yes.
Charlie had nothing to do with those arrangements, right?
No.
And that's when you moved into the Aqua Ridge house?
Yes.
showing you what's marked as Defense Exhibit 1 for identification purposes only. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Do you recognize the email addresses on this document?
I do.
Is that your email address in July of 2012?
It was my work email address, so that makes sense. That must have been my email.
Does this look like an email that you could have received from your mom?
It does. I don't remember this email, but it does look like an email I could have received.
Judge, I would move this into evidence as Defense Exhibit 1 at this time.
Is there an objection?
Objection, hearsay.
This is an email between your mom and you in July of 2012, right?
Yes.
And just pointing to just under paragraph 2, I just need to know that I can legally take my children and move to another location. There was concern that you wanted to make sure that you weren't breaking the law, right?
Correct.
What can I legally remove from the house to the new location? There was concern that you wanted to do everything within the law, right?
Correct.
Okay, well, I think we can all just end the court case once again here. She asked once what was legal to take out of the house. But the way that she left him was so awful. And what a awful thing to do to the children, you know? You know, everything, the kind of mother that she is just a selfish mother, obviously, who doesn't care about her children growing up without a father. I just boggles my mind. What was she telling herself? I think it was just total self-absorption. But what was the rationalization? They'll get over it? Because you never get over something like that. Ever. For 10, what would it be? 10 years, 9 years? So she didn't have to wait 9 years to move out of, 10 years out to move out of Miami, to move to Miami, maybe a little more. It's ridiculous.
Now, we've heard a lot about this TV already. So let's just clear this up right now. Charlie bought you the TV, right?
Yes.
More precisely, Charlie had your parents buy the TV and he paid them back.
Yes.
And they bought the TV from Best Buy, right?
Yes.
Have you ever bought anything from Best Buy?
I'm sure I have.
When you buy from Best Buy, they always try you to get the Geek Squad warranty, right?
Yeah, they do.
And people like me always fall for that, right? But when you call and you need a repair on the TV, it's got to be registered to your name, right?
I think so.
So while Ashman was looking for that, what he's making the point is that
Do you know if the Geek Squad was registered to your mom and dad?
I don't know offhand, but if they're the ones who bought the TV, then they probably bought the, Geek Squad policy that went with it too.
she loves to say Geek Squad. So he's making the point that the reason that she didn't fix this TV that Jeff Lacasse observed was intentionally broken, and he felt that Wendi did it, or an adult did it, And then she made them watch, meaning her children. It was their movie night gift. She made the kids watch that movie on the broken TV so that Jeff Lacasse would remember it. Remember the broken TV. First, she made him look at it. And then she said, don't, he offered to replace it. And she didn't want it replaced. And then on the day of the murder, when it was her alibi, she didn't want it fixed because logical sense would tell you that she didn't need it fixed. It was just used as an alibi the same way that Jeffrey Lacasse was used as the fall guy. Fortunately for him, he left early on his trip, but had he left on his trip at the time he intended to leave, it would have taken him right by Dan Markel's house, leaving, speeding away, and it would look like he was upset with Wendi for breaking up with him. So Daniel Rashbaum is smartly making the argument that she just didn't get it fixed because it was in her parents' name.
If I showed you the receipt, would that refresh your recollection?
I don't really have an independent recollection, so I don't think so.
We'll come back to that. Now, Charlie made that joke many times, right?
He did.
He never told you he actually looked into hiring a hitman, right?
No.
Did you think he was serious?
No.
By the way, the state has you as a co-conspirator with Charlie Adelson, right?
I believe so.
But they also have you, according to them, blurting out during an interview that your alleged co-conspirator did the murder. Does that make any sense?
I don't understand the
Let
question.
me rephrase. They have you guys as co-conspirators. They think you did a murder together, right?
I think so. That's what they believe.
If you did a murder together, why would you have blurred out a statement like that?
I clearly would not.
Yeah, because she wanted to lay it all out there for the police so they didn't arrest her. She kept asking the police, am I a suspect? Are you going to read my Miranda rights? So if she put out her brother as a possible suspect, then it couldn't possibly be her brother and it couldn't possibly be Wendi, right? That's the thinking, Daniel Rashbaum. Because if she mentioned everyone in the world but her family, that would look awfully suspicious, no? This was very well thought out by smart people. It's not a dumb crime, whatever you want to say about it. There are definitely mistakes made, like, say, driving by the crime scene. That would not be advisable. Talking in public, talking on the phone, sending emails. I have a question for you guys. Why would Donna, who's so hesitant to speak on the phone, write all those ideas in email? Even if those came before the family really committed to hiring a hitman to eliminate Dan Markel, it's awfully, wouldn't she think that would show up in the divorce? Or is there not that same kind of discovery? I guess there isn't, right? But boy, is it damaging in all these trials, Donna's emails. It's incredibly damaging. And I don't know any other Jewish woman who would want to exact revenge in that kind of way. Dress your kids up in Nazi outfits. Convert them to Catholicism or Christianity. I can't remember which one. I think Christianity. Am I right? Or is it Catholicism? Was I right the first time? Either way, it speaks to a kind of self-hatred.
Do you know if Charlie repeated that joke in March of 2014 when you went to Yardbirds with Jeff Lacoste?
He may have, if I was mentioning the TV was broken or something like that.
Do you know who else was at that dinner?
Katie.
During your divorce, you spoke to your mom daily, probably, right?
I would usually call my parents on my way to drop kids at school. We'd have a short conversation. So that sounds right.
It's fair to say that your parents were involved in some of the decisions that you were making in the divorce. You were asking their advice.
For some of the time.
Did you often speak with Charlie about what was happening in the divorce?
Not too much, no.
But fair to say Charlie was supportive of you, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was always supportive of me.
Is Charlie kind of self-centered?
I don't think so.
At the time of your divorce, though, he had a lot going on in his life.
I mean, his life was going great. He had a great business. He always had lots of girls. He had friends.
The divorce was settled in July of 2013.
Correct.
How did you feel after it was settled?
I felt better. I felt a sense of relief that we could just move on with our lives.
See, excuse me, I had a cough. See, she was moving on with her life. Case closed, not involved. She moved on, wasn't thinking about it. And Charlie was too self-centered, too busy, or too happy. So, defense attorney wants to make the argument that he was too self-centered to hire a hitman for Wendi, for his sister. But this family is enmeshed. I can't stress that enough. Everyone who's not in Adelson, it's us against them. And there is a really kind of almost powerful connection I see between Wendi and Charlie, almost like lovers. It's very weird, very off-putting. So I don't think any of these arguments are persuasive. And I don't think Wendi's a very good witness for all her poise and control and achievements. I think she's incredibly unlikable. I think her lies are hard to believe. And I think any fair jury would think that she's lying and involved. I really pray and hope she's charged.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about this relocation issue. Isn't it true that your attorney told you that there was very little chance for you to win that motion?
I believe so, yes.
Let me talk about this. See, this is what I think is a more interesting part of this cross-examination. Even if your attorney tells you there's very little chance, Wendi Adelson comes from a family that feels that they deserve everything that they want. So even if there's a little chance, she's exceptional. Exceptional things happen to her. She's going to be hoping that the judge sees how horrible, since all her friends see how horrible, thanks to Wendi propagandizing them with how quote unquote abusive he was. LOL. Of course she's going to hope that other people don't get it. Other unexceptional people don't get this kind of judgment, but she's going to get it. So they're saying she wouldn't enact revenge. She wouldn't be disappointed. She wouldn't feel desperate after being turned down by the judge to relocate to Miami. Nice try, but I really think Rashman is a good lawyer, but he just had really guilty client.
Where were you working in Tallahassee? Let's go backwards, actually. In 2007, when you were married, where were you working in Tallahassee?
At that time, I would have been working at the FSU Center for Human Rights.
And you were lobbying for anti-human trafficking legislation?
I was primarily representing victims of human trafficking, but I did a little bit of lobbying too.
But the funding for your job ran out and you lost your job, right?
Yeah.
At the time of the divorce, you had gotten a job at FSU. What was that job?
At the time of the divorce, I was adjunct teaching a few classes at the law school, and I had a number of different jobs at FSU, but by that point I was probably running something called a medical legal partnership, where I would work with the law school, the medical school, and the social work school to help the students work together to try to help solve legal problems that clients had.
Did you like that job?
I did, yeah.
So if you liked the job so much, why were you looking to relocate?
I mean, relocation was not a big issue for me. I probably never would have thought of it. A friend suggested it to me that it might be helpful. Maybe I would get more time with the kids if I could relocate. But I wasn't really focused on it. I didn't think it would happen, and I was pretty happy being at my job.
That is such nonsense. When you know that the evidence, the emails, just from her mother alone, the first time she thought of it was when her friend suggested it, because she wanted to spend more time with the children. This is absurd. An absurd lie. And then you have Jeff Lacasse, who's a great witness, saying that was all she talked about, how much she hated Tallahassee. And then you have her book. Characters all based on Tallahassee, hates Tallahassee. These are kind of dumb lies. And once again, I mean, just bad witness, terrible witness.
Now, you were a non-tenured clinical professor in that job, right?
That's right.
It meant that you could lose the job at any time. Is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
And you were had a lot of responsibilities, now being divorced, even more responsibilities with the kids.
Sure.
And you were offered a job at a prestigious law firm in Miami. Is that fair to say?
I was, yes.
And that job was going to have a pretty big salary increase.
Yes.
And it was going to give you an opportunity for more stability. Fair enough?
Yeah.
You were also going to have the benefit of family
in
South Florida who could help you with the kids, right?
Yeah.
Now, even with this relocation request, was it ever your intention for Professor Markel to be absent from your boy's life?
Never, no.
What? So she thought he'd spend more time with her if she was wait, hold on. Wendi thought that Dan Markel, her ex-husband, was going to spend more time with the kids if she was in Miami? That it wouldn't interfere at all? These are just They're stupid lies is what they are. Because the jury's already heard some of the other evidence. Now it's just I just don't understand what she wants to achieve with this. I guess she thinks maybe she can hang the jury. But this is not a strategy to an acquittal.
Okay. When you lost the relocation motion, I think it's fair to say that your mom and dad were pretty upset.
That's right.
It's fair to say that your mom came up with some crazy ideas.
Totally bonkers. Yes.
We saw the email about conversion of the kids, right?
Yes.
By the way, did you ever do any of that?
No.
So you never dressed the kids up, you never baptized them, you never took a picture of them?
No.
Okay. Did your mom keep bugging you to do any of that stuff?
No, I think it was just one crazy email.
By the way, in all of these emails, did your mom ever tell you to do something violent to Professor Markel?
No.
Was there ever any discussion of threats of violence in any way?
No, never.
Mr. Ashman, I'm going to permit you to ask one more question, and from there, we're going to go into recess for the evening, but your examination of the witness will go into tomorrow.
Have you ever heard of the Prof's blog?
Sure.
Remember those questions that Ms. Kappelman asked you about how people could know about Danny traveling on the weekend of his murder? Remember those questions?
I do, yes.
Would it surprise? What is the Prof's blog?
It was a blog that Danny started with some friends to talk about the law and legal theories and to kind of have conversations in space with other law professors.
I'm showing you it's marked as Defense Exhibit 2. And this will be quick, Your Honor. I promise.
I was going to say, we went from 1 to 5 real quick.
It'll be quick.
Please show your exhibit to the witness.
Does this look like a posting from the Prof's blog?
It does, yes.
Judge, I admit Defense Exhibit 2 into evidence at this point in time.
Any objections to the state?
I'd like to take a look at it first, Your Honor.
Okay, you go.
You don't have to approach. We're going to handle this without the jurors.
I'll ask it one last question, and then we can, if you would, we can handle.
One means one, not
One means one. Do you know if Professor Markel would frequently post his travel schedule on his Prof's blog?
He would post it on his Prof's blog and on his Facebook.
Yeah, because the Latin King, they read the Prof blog, especially when they're doing a murder before they extort someone just for fun, an unpaid murder, driving 7 hours out of the way for an unpaid murder when they could just threaten Charlie directly when they're in the same town. They want to go far out of their way to Tallahassee and back before they start extorting him. What a defense. If Daniel Rashbaum has any weaknesses as a lawyer, My opinion is that he goes on too long. If he could short his closing argument was absolutely about 3 times, 2 times, 3 times too long. It was really laborious, and by the end there, I don't think he was scoring any points. I'm going to take a quick break. When we get back, the rest of Wendi Adelson's testimony, including the re-examination by the great Georgia Kappelman. Stay tuned. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Okay. So funny. My boyfriend, when I first started talking about Georgia Kappelman, he thought I was saying Georgia Catwoman. I thought it was so funny. So it's, I guess, her new nickname around here, Georgia Catwoman. Excellent, excellent attorney. For those of you in the audience who dislike Jeffrey Lacasse, can you let me know why? I'm just so curious what it is that you object to so strongly about him. I got a few really negative comments about him. I consider him one of the heroes, along with a neighbor who immediately went to Dan Markel after he heard the shots and called 911. I'm just curious as to why some people who are familiar with this case do not like him. Okay, so we're back with Wendi Adelson's cross-examination in her brother Charlie Adelson's trial. Here we go.
Do you recall that your parents and Charlie were quite excited to come watch you in Tallahassee at this event in August?
Yes.
Do you recall your brother saying he couldn't wait to book a ticket, that it was fucking awesome?
Yeah, he was very excited.
Wow, what a face. So that's her sweet smile face. Yeah, we're a very close family. Everyone's really loving and close, and my wonderful brother was so supportive of me and happy. It plays the other way. I was thinking during the break, is she doesn't care how her testimony affects Charlie. This is my latest thought. She really just cares how it affects her. So she'll lie as much as she can, even when she has immunity and they can't really use any of this testimony, just to make herself look better. So anything that will make her look bad, she's going to lie about. But it has the opposite effect. It's just so curious when the stakes are really high after Dan's murder, she's going to let out the joke about the TV, the contentious divorce, all on the table to show honesty. But on the stand, when she knows it's being broadcasted, she's just going to lie and lie and lie, because image is everything. And that's why it's also so important to disparage Dan Markel. I know most of the court-watching public thinks he's wonderful, but I'm here to tell you he's really awful. It doesn't play well.
Do you recall discussing with Professor Markel who would have custody of the boys during various trips in August and September of 2014?
Yes.
Do you recall having those discussions in July of 2014?
That would make sense, yeah.
Do Do you recall scheduling a whole host of meetings after July 18th, 2014?
Yes.
Let me be more precise. Before July 18, 2014, do you recall scheduling a bunch of meetings that were to occur after July 18th, 2014 in Tallahassee?
Yes.
Do you recall making plans with a friend moving to Tallahassee for July 25th, 2014?
I don't.
Let me see if I can refresh your memory.
Okay, so end the trial again, once again, right here, because Wendi made plans for dates after Dan Markel's murder, meaning, so what he's trying to say here is if she knew he was going to be murdered, she wouldn't make any of these plans. Not that it would look sus as heck if she didn't have any plans and she broke all her plans after Dan's murder, on dates after Dan's murder. That would look awfully odd, no? So, talk about grasping at straws here. This is some straw grasping if I've ever seen it.
Do you know an individual named Tahira Lee?
I do.
May I approach Your Honor with Defense Exhibit 15? And I would direct you to the email on June 17th, 2014, which I think is the fourth email on the first page, and see if that refreshes your memory. But feel free to look at the whole document.
I see it, but you were asking if they were moving to Tallahassee on the 25th, or if I...
No.
Read to yourself, Ms. Adelson, don't read aloud.
Okay, sorry.
I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
Do you recall making plans with her where you said you would make plans with her after August 25th, 2014, because your family was coming to town?
Yes.
And that happened, that correspondence was in late June of 2014?
Yes.
Do you recall in June, you can put that aside now.
Okay.
Do you recall in June of 2014, late June of 2014, expressing interest in joining the board of a Tallahassee-based child advocacy nonprofit called American Children's Campaign?
I do.
That was in Tallahassee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall scheduling a meeting for July 23rd, 2014 with a Professor Van Dern with the FSU College of Medicine?
So I don't, but I ran a medical legal partnership. So I would have been setting up meetings with the medical school, with the law school, with the social work school. So that would have been normal, but I don't remember it specifically.
See, this is what I meant. Is he proved his point with the first couple of questions about scheduling events. He does not need to bring up every event she scheduled or every meeting she scheduled after Dan's murder date. It's redundant and it's just fatiguing and dragging his case.
May I approach, Your Honor? Does this refresh your recollection that you were scheduling a meeting with Professor Van Dern for July 23rd of 2014?
Yes.
Do you recall schedule? You can put that aside.
Okay.
Do you recall scheduling a meeting with your divorce lawyer to meet any time of the week of July 21, 2014?
Again, I don't remember specifically, but it sounds like it would have made sense for the time.
Do you know an individual named Cindy Jean?
I do.
Do you remember emailing her and asking her if the kids were available to go swimming at the pool on July 19th to 20th?
I don't remember, but it sounds like something I would have asked.
May I approach Your Honor with Defense Exhibit 20 for identification purposes only? Does this refresh your memory about trying to set up that play date for July 20th or July 19th with Miss Jean?
Yes.
You can put that aside.
I'm sorry, Miss Adelson. So you didn't write to Miss Jean, I'm sorry, we are unavailable for the play date because I plan to have my ex-husband murdered and plan to flee to Miami? You didn't write that, did you? No. Oh. Move. I mean, what does he think? This is, I guess, when you have nothing, this is what you, for defense, this is what you come up with, but it's so laborious. It's so tedious.
Do you recall that your mom planned to visit Tallahassee in November of 2014?
I don't remember that.
I'm showing, may I approach Your Honor with Defense Exhibit 21 for identification purposes only?
You may.
Please take a look at this.
This is a good preview, though, for the kind of evidence that you would expect to see if Donna or Wendi were ever indicted and tried for this crime. Emails, plans that were made for after, before Dan's murder, but that were at a date after the murder, showing no one in their right mind would make plans knowing that they couldn't fulfill them, knowing how their whole world would change with Dan Markel's murder. But they sure had that celebration dinner prepared and ready to go. Just something I didn't have time to read yesterday. So I talk about this family being a family of revenge. So I read some of this in a previous episode, but this is a tip that came in from a gentleman named Clark, and he said he was a friend. He said that Charlie did not earn his degree, did not have enough requirements to earn his degree, and amongst the allegations, he was somehow, okay, wait, let me start from the beginning. As Charlie, okay, so this is Clark. Clark also helped start up the dental school at Nova Southeastern. He was friends with the Adelson family. As a favor for Harvey, that's Wendi and Charlie's father, Clark was able to get Charlie in dental school, even at the disagreement with other faculty members. As Charlie progressed in school, he was failing and was not doing his required work in the classes. When Clark brought this up to Charlie, Charlie got defensive and then accused Clark of harassing him sexually while at school. Clark was able to disprove this allegation, but this severed the friendship between him and Harvey, Wendi and Charlie's father. Clark explained that Harvey was somehow able to use his influence on the Nova board to include a local judge in Broward County to get Charlie passed through with a degree. Clark explained that Charlie did not meet 25% of his requirements to earn his degree, and amongst the allegations, he was somehow just given a degree and has been practicing periodontics with his father ever since. Clark explained that Charlie is manipulative and a pathological liar. Clark explained that all this occurred around 2006 and that in 2008, he and Harvey had a chance encounter while on vacation. He stated that once Harvey saw him, he immediately approached him, got within inches of his face, and they were nearly touching. Clark stated that Harvey wanted to fight him right there on vacation, but Clark was able to walk away from the encounter. But beforehand, Harvey made a statement to the effect, quote, "No one ever messes with my children," unquote. So that will give you an idea of the values of this family. Of course, there's an older brother who is estranged from the family, who was very upset by Dan's murder and very interested in who did it. Of course, his mother disapproved of his love. He married another woman, is what I've heard, and divorced her and eventually married the love of his life, who Donna disapproved of. They used to laugh at him and call him Honest Abe because he would return incorrect change if it was too much. So what a thing to make fun of your son for, acting morally, right? So what I get from that story is this is a family that looks down on people who play by the rules, who have a strong sense of morality. They want to win at all costs, and they see themselves as a kind of unit. Anyone who threatens that unit they will enact their revenge on. And as you remember, Dan Markel was threatening. He was making legal filings to have the court censure Wendi legally for hiding her assets. And that would have been really, had that gone through, that would have been really, really bad for Wendi. He was publicly humiliating this family. That's the way they saw it. In addition to the motivation of getting the kids to Miami.
Yes.
Does this refresh your memory that your parents planned on being in Tallahassee on November 17th? Does that refresh your memory?
Mm-hmm.
You can put that aside. Do you recall asking your parents to come to Tallahassee on August 1, 2014 for a birthday party with Ben?
I don't remember doing that, but it's close in time to his birthday.
May I approach your honor with Defense Exhibit 22?
Okay.
Does this refresh your recollection that you were going to have a birthday party for Ben in Tallahassee in early August of 2014?
That's right.
You can put that aside. And that your parents were going to come up for that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall making flight reservations to travel to Newark and then back to Tallahassee? So you're going to leave from Tallahassee and go to Newark, come back to Tallahassee for a wedding in October 2014.
I do.
And you made those reservations in July of 2014. Do you recall that?
I don't recall when I made the reservation, but I remember the wedding.
May I approach your honor with Defense Exhibit 23? Does this refresh your recollection that the reservation was made sometime around July 14th, 2014?
Yes.
That you were booking tickets for a wedding in New Jersey on October 24th, 2014?
Look at Charlie scanning, his eyes scanning the jury, and then looking very disappointed. If he is as much of a liar as so many of these people who left tips and who knew him said, then he would be someone who would be very aware of how to read people's faces. And he knows that the jury this is not going well. That this isn't landing where the jury looks so disappointed.
Yes.
And the cost of those tickets were over $400, right?
That's right.
You put that aside. Those tickets weren't to go back to Miami, were they?
No, it was Tallahassee to Newark, Newark to Tallahassee.
Why did you make those tickets to go back to Tallahassee?
That is where I lived.
We're going to move on to another subject.
You think it might be a little sus if she made the flight arrangements going back to Miami? These kind of arguments, aren't strong.
Ms. Kappelman talked a little bit yesterday about the litigation that occurred after the relocation litigation with Professor Markel. You recall that?
I do.
And there were these pieces of litigation back and forth about money and about filing false affidavits. You remember those?
Yes.
It was what was called the motion against your mom that Professor Markel filed. You recall that, right?
I do.
Okay.
So this is also the other big thing, which I think really riled up the Adelson family, is that Dan made a filing that he was a victim of parental alienation, that Donna had disparaged him so much to his own children that it was affecting their relationship. And he was asking the court to only let Donna have supervised visits with the family. How humiliating would have that been for Donna? Oh, you used to go up to Tallahassee, all the time. Why aren't you going so much anymore? What's going on? Who's that court-appointed woman with Wendi? I don't know. That would have been such a humiliation. They think they should have, this is a woman who thinks that she should have access all the time, and she's already mad about the fact that they're in Tallahassee. This would be like the final straw. So this murder did not stem just from the issue of the children, of location, of Wendy's inability to move the children to Miami. It's much richer and deeper than that.
With regards to the motion that Professor Markel filed claiming that you and your attorney filed a false affidavit. Did you get the sense that you were going to prevail on that litigation?
Yes.
Was the judge getting frustrated with Professor Markel on that litigation?
Very.
Did the judge admonish Professor Markel regarding that litigation?
The judge said he needed to stop.
Were you concerned about getting disbarred?
No.
She's not concerned about being arrested, so she testified that she will never be arrested and tried for this crime. And she's not concerned, she wasn't concerned about being disbarred and having her livelihood taken away from her. No concern there. Even if you think you're going to win, you're going to be concerned. You're going to be worried. Because as a lawyer, she should know that unjust things happen in this world, things that she would consider unjust. But whatever the answer is, the quickest answer to make her look good, it's like instant gratification answers.
I want to talk a little bit about Jeff Lacoste. You first met Mr. Lacoste in the fall of 2013.
Yes,
It was casual at first.
it was.
You were dating other people as well.
I was.
It got more serious around March of 2014.
That's right.
Fair to say he was in love with you?
I don't really remember. I don't think I could say, but it was more serious.
Okay. You weren't so sure about him. Is that fair to say?
I think my feelings developed over time.
And then they undeveloped?
And then they undeveloped.
Yeah, it's one of those things. They undeveloped when he was no more longer useful. Yeah. Oh, she's so hateable. And who else had the society pages? Jeff Lacoste. Thank you, Jeff song singing when he asked about it. I certainly did. This family must hate Jeff Lacoste. Because he's the truth teller. And he tells all of it, even the stuff that makes him look not so good.
You were very different people from very different backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
You didn't spend much time with your parents, right?
I think maybe he met them once.
He wanted to meet them more than once, right? He didn't like that he didn't get to see them more times.
I think he wanted to be more integrated into my life.
Jeff Lacoste met Charlie Adelson one time in March of 2014, right?
That's right.
He accompanied you on a trip with law students, right?
I used to run an alternative spring break, and he came with me.
And you decided to come down to South Florida for a day or two, right?
That's right.
And you had dinner at a place called Yardbird, right?
That's right.
Are you aware that that happened on March 11th, 2014?
No, I don't remember the date, just that it was during the spring break.
Fair enough. You remember sitting outside on the patio?
I do.
And it was you and Mr. Lacoste and Charlie and a woman named Catherine Magbanawa. Do you recall that?
That's right.
Who was Charlie's girlfriend at the time.
Yes.
Are you aware that Sigfredo Garcia was watching you at that dinner?
No.
Are you aware that he was contemplating running your brother over with his car at that dinner?
No.
After dinner, you and Jeff Lacoste stayed at Charlie's house, right?
We did.
Miss Magbanawa wasn't there, right?
I don't remember her being there.
It was just the three of you.
I think so.
And you left the next morning.
We did.
Now, you and Mr. Lacoste started having issues around May of 2014. Is that fair to say?
That sounds about right.
You started to become nervous around him?
I don't really remember if I was nervous around him, but I started thinking it wasn't the right relationship.
He started accusing you of being unfaithful, right?
He did.
Yeah, the prosecution has her dating because of her phone. She had to hand over her phone. She had all these dating apps, and she was dating a lot of other people on her phone. So the defense is making this claim here via this question. Like, it was so outrageous for Jeffrey Lacoste to accuse her of being unfaithful. And he's going to ask her, well, you weren't unfaithful. And she's like, no, I was. Okay. Once again, that's Wendi's word. Case closed. She said it. She's under oath. It's absurd. And if anything, it just makes me feel sorry for the defense that they have so little to go with.
He accused you of having an affair with someone that you had previously dated?
He did.
Excuse me. You told him that you didn't. You denied it.
That's right.
And he didn't believe you.
He did not.
And
so not only did Jeff Lacoste not believe the valedictorian Wendi Adelson, he's now has some kind of paranoid person accuser. So now they're trying to paint Jeff Lacoste as some kind of frenzied, jealous, vengeful ex-boyfriend. And we know that didn't work when the Adelson family set him up that way. And it doesn't work here in court either. He's an excellent witness. I mean, pretty much as close to a perfect kind of witness as you want to get. Honest, easy to understand, interesting to listen to. Has a job that people associate with trustworthiness. Social work professor. I know Wendi has the prop of helping trafficked women, but there's so much strong evidence of the fact that she was in a really contentious divorce, that her family disliked him, that she disliked him, still even on the stand. Almost everything she says about Dan Markel is negative or disparaging. But she can't help herself.
before this individual that you used to date, you had coffee with at a place called All Saints in Tallahassee, right?
I did.
And Mr. Lacoste saw you having coffee with this individual, right?
He did.
And that caused a confrontation. Is that fair to say?
He flew into a rage.
Subsequently, he went through your...
So now Jeff Lacoste is a rageful stalker. He was just randomly saw them at the coffee shop and broke into a rage, like he was hiding in the bushes, following her around. Like OJ, JL. This is madness.
Your phone and planner, right?
He did.
And this is around May, June of 2014.
That sounds right.
And you and Mr. Lacoste went to Gainesville for a weekend for his work at some point around this time frame.
Yes.
And that Saturday night, June 28th, he basically exploded at you.
He did.
He yelled at you for hours.
He did.
He accused you of having affairs with multiple people.
He did.
You were very upset, to say the least.
I was devastated. Yep.
Now, you were scheduled...
She was devastated even though the claims were true. So this is I believe this might be the Where she falls into a ball on the floor, and where I wondered if it had to do a dual purpose: one, to manipulate Jeff Lacasse, but two, was this her practice boo-hooing? Was this her practice hysteria crying for when Dan Markel was murdered and she had to come into the police station? Or was she just such a nervous wreck with all of this planning of this murder and worry for herself that she was an emotional wreck? I don't know. I think she is a very, very unhappy, troubled, disturbed person.
To leave for South Florida, I believe it was on June 30th or June 29th to celebrate your dad's 70th birthday, right?
That sounds right.
And Mr. Lacoste wasn't invited.
No.
You went down to South Florida on June 30th, and you and the boys stayed with your parents, right?
We did.
You had the boys with you the whole time.
Yes.
Dan Markel didn't have the boys at that point in time. The boys were with you.
Yes.
And Charlie knew that, right?
Yes, he was with us.
Your mom planned a big party for the birthday.
She did.
Now, I think when Miss Kappelman asked you if the birthday fell on a Saturday, you weren't sure.
I remembered it being on his actual birthday, which I thought was a Saturday, but I don't remember the calendar from 2014.
May I approach Your Honor with Defendant's Exhibit 25?
So enough about this birthday party. They did the same argument with Katie McBanawa, that because Charlie didn't bring Katie to his father's birthday party, they weren't that close at that time. Same thing with Jeff Lacasse, but this was neither of them brought dates. I think there was 50 to 70 people, family and friends. It was an intimate gathering. And of course, if it's a celebration dinner, you're not going to want to bring Jeff Lacasse or Katie.
Ms. Adelson, does this refresh your recollection that July 5th, 2014 was on a Saturday?
Yes.
And that the party was at 7:30 p.m. or
Yes.
thereabouts?
Mhm.
Put that aside. Now, when you got back to Tallahassee, you saw Mr. Lacoste on July 13th.
That sounds right.
And when you saw him, it was not a good meeting. Is that fair to say? It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You saw him the next day at a yoga studio,
I went to yoga and he wanted to come.
and it was awkward
It was.
and kind of tense.
It was.
And he asked to see you again.
Not for nothing. Maybe I'm old fashioned, but I cannot think of any more of I don't want to say turn off, but something that would, I wouldn't want a guy who's dating to watch me do yoga. I wouldn't want to see a guy I was dating do yoga. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if I'm alone in that.
Later that week,
He did.
and you didn't want to.
I did not.
And when you got home that night, you sent him an email asking him not to contact you for at least 7 days, that you wanted to think things over. Is that
I
fair
did.
to say?
Yes.
You never saw him again, right?
No.
Yeah, right. Because once I left him in the parking lot after asking him about his trip and when he was leaving, and if he wasn't going to take the trip, Why not? And all these very bizarre questions about this trip. Wendi seemed to have an obscene interest in Jeffrey Lacasse's trip that he planned to take on the day of Dan's murder. She never saw him again. I mean, what a failed attempt to make Jeff Lacasse look like a out of control, emotionally liable stalker.
Are you now aware that there was a first attempt on your ex-husband's life on June 4th and June 4th, 5th of 2014?
Yes.
When you lived with Professor Markel on Trescott, was your address publicly listed?
I believe so.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
This, I think, is so interesting. This is a real lawyer. So watch Daniel Rashbaum here. He's going to put his full hand over his mouth so that no one can read his lips who's watching on TV. This may be is it coming up or does it happen a second time? Oh, they cut it out. No, I think that's maybe the second time he does it. As he's ending his questions.
Members of the jury, when the parties agree that certain facts are true, that is called a stipulation of fact, you must accept stipulated facts as having been proven. However, the significance of these facts, as with all facts, is for you to decide. In this case, the stipulated facts that you must accept are true are: the Markel children were enrolled at Creative Preschool located in Tallahassee. During the week of July 14th, 2024, their drop-off pickup schedule was as follows. Monday, July 14th, 2024, dropped off at 8:55 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 5 p.m. by Dan Markel. Tuesday, July 15th, 2014, dropped off at 8:25 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 4:50 p.m. by Dan Markel. Wednesday, July 16th, 2014, dropped off at 9 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 4:30 p.m. by Wendi Adelson. Thursday, July 17th, 2014, dropped off at 8:30 a.m. by Wendi Adelson, picked up at 4:45 p.m. by Dan Markel. Friday, July 18th, 2014, dropped off at 8:50 a.m. by Dan Markel.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I want to first focus your attention on the July 17, 2014 schedule.
So this, excuse me, this is all going to be sensitive to Wendi, anything around the schedule, because she would have been the only one to know Dan's schedule. Charlie, they've already established he's very busy and happy with his life. He's not going to know Dan's schedule. Donna's not going to know Dan's schedule. Wendi is the only one who could tell the hitman Dan's schedule. And should she ever be tried for this, I would expect they're going to put on a bunch of witnesses to testify to that. And it will be interesting. Some people are speculating that Charlie might turn on his own sister. I would think that would depend on the state of the Adelson family. Are they still a cohesive unit? Now, Donna and Harvey did not attend Charlie's trial. And Wendi was only there because she had testifying because she had an immunity deal. So she can't be tried using any of the evidence she gave in any of the trials she testified in. But one would hope that she would make the same arrogant mistake that her brother made in this trial and testify should she have a trial. That would be a gift to the prosecution. Even being a lawyer, have her lie and see how it works with the jury. I find her so unlikable, as do I would think the majority of the people who would watch this trial would find her unlikable and hard to believe. Let her do it. Really hope that she gets indicted for this crime.
On July 17, 2014, as Your Honor just recited, do you recall dropping the kids off at school at 8:30 in the morning?
Yes.
And Professor Markel picked them up at 4:45 p.m. on that day, thereabouts.
Which I just heard, but I wouldn't have known what time.
You didn't pick them up that
I
day.
didn't. No, it wasn't my day.
So it would be impossible. The person would be wrong if they said that they saw you and the kids by Professor Markel's house in the afternoon or morning of July 17, 2014, correct?
It would be some other woman and some other kids.
You spoke to your mom probably close to daily, right?
Yeah.
During this time period. She would know when you had the kids and didn't have the kids, right?
Probably.
Now, I want to go back to something briefly that we talked about yesterday before we stopped. You knew that Professor Markel posted his travel plans on Facebook and on his profs blog, right?
Yes.
He would talk about places and conferences that he was speaking at, right?
He would.
Are you aware that...
Miss Adelson, are you aware that the profs blog is the most well-read blog by the Latin Kings?
On the weekend of the 20th, he was supposed to speak at a conference in New Jersey, and he posted it on Prof's blog as well as on Facebook.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about Best Buy. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's marked for identification purposes only as Defense Exhibit 29 and 30. Looking at Defense Exhibit 29, does that refresh your recollection that the warranty was under your father's name for
Yes.
that TV?
Mm-hmm.
A warranty with the Geek Squad?
Yes.
Now, before you look at Exhibit 20, do you recall that your mother scheduled the appointment for the TV to be fixed with this Geek Squad?
I remembered that I scheduled it, but it looks like she scheduled it and gave me the number to call in case I needed to reschedule it.
And in fact, she emailed you on July 11th and told you if you can't keep the appointment on the 18th, call this number to reschedule it, right?
Yes.
You can put that aside.
Right. So if this doesn't, if something goes wrong and this hit doesn't go down on the day we planned, just reschedule it. See, these are the kind of things that make me wonder about Donna's emails. She seems so careful in this email to tell her to make sure to reschedule it. But she's so unguarded on the emails around the children. I guess, like Wendi, she couldn't help herself. But I wouldn't be reminding the jury about the TV, because if the jury buys that the TV is an alibi for this murder, then you're making the jury think about the fact that the whole family is in on it, that this is a family decision. The TV's in the family's name, the mother's arranging for the repair, and her brother bought it for her, and their brother's making the joke, and it was purposely broken. So if the jury accepts all those things that as fact, it looks very bad for Wendi and Charlie. So why do this? I think this was a mistake here. I would just be ridiculing it as a bad joke and move on.
I want to talk a little bit more about July 18th. Do you recall leaving your house that day on Aqua Ridge Ray around 12:30 in the afternoon?
I do.
And you were going to meet a friend for lunch at a place called Mosaic.
Yes.
But you had to pick up a bottle of, I don't know if it's bourbon or whiskey. I don't even know if they're the same thing, but Bullet whiskey.
It was bourbon.
Okay. It was for your friend's wedding shower that night?
They were having a stock the bar party, so they asked for specific kinds of alcohol to stock the bar.
And I'm showing you what's marked as Defense Exhibit 32. Is this the invitation that you received?
Yes, that's it.
Judge, I would move Defense Exhibit 32 into evidence at this point in time.
Any objection?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Exception?
State of mind.
You can provide me with the exhibit.
And is not scoring any points with this either. Who buys alcohol so far in advance of this party? Most people I know will stop on their way to the party and stop at a liquor store. They're always open late. And a liquor store on the way. Instead, she's going way out of her way to a liquor store. And I think this is some of the stronger evidence against Wendi, so that she can drive as near as she can. It was roped off from her. Drive by the crime scene. Why remind the jury of this? It doesn't help that they've seen the invitation. No one's arguing that she made this party up.
The objection is sustained. She may testify as to her.
Do you recall on the left-hand corner of the invitation, it says, help the bride and groom stock the bar for their wedding and bring a bottle of Bullet bourbon. Do you recall that?
Yes.
You can put that aside. Now, you decided to go to ABC Liquors on Bedden Road to look for the bourbon, right?
He did.
You're not a big drinker. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Not according to Jeffrey Lacoste. He said she drank her dinner most nights. She also told the cop in her police interview that she wasn't a big drinker. It's important for her to, I guess, drink in secret, be seen as someone who doesn't drink a lot. But it's so funny, after Rashbaum shows the jury the invitation to the stock the booze party, whatever it's called, Charlie nods like, yep, see, that was a good point made. I mean, what? Like, oh, he kind of scans the jury and then nods his head like, oh, yep, we made a good point. See, there's nothing to that story that she drove by the crime scene with the ridiculous excuse that she had a bad sense of direction and she had to go to a liquor store to get this bourbon hours and hours before the party. It's absurd.
You went to that store because you were familiar with it?
I'd seen it close to my house, so.
Close to your old house?
Close to my old house.
There could have been liquor stores that were closer to your current house?
Sure.
Little slip from Wendi there. She considers that her house. Very interesting.
Now, when you drove to ABC Liquor, you tried to go through Trescott. Is that fair to say?
It was blocked.
There are other ways to go to ABC Liquor, right? You could have gone down other roads.
I don't have the best sense of direction, so when I find a route, I just kind of keep using that route. I don't look for something else.
Because I like to spend a lot of gas money on going far out of my way hours before. It's so absurd. Why remind the jury of this? It makes me think that maybe Charlie was a really difficult client. I don't know what Rashbaum's style is. I don't know if he has a reputation for being a little long-winded, or if this is done to please his client, to show his difficult client that he's really working for him. And he's going to do long cross-examinations to kind of prove that. But the last half an hour or 20 minutes of this has been totally unnecessary. And if anything, works to the prosecution's favor.
You got to Mosaic at around 1 p.m.
That sounds right.
and your lunch was interrupted by Investigator Isom, who told you that something had happened.
That's right.
You went with him voluntarily to speak
did.
with him? You let police search your car?
Yes.
You were interviewed with the investigator from approximately 2:45 p.m. until 7:50 p.m.?
Yes.
He told you that your ex-husband had been shot and was unlikely to survive, right?
Yes.
You were in shock.
Yes.
You were pretty open with police, telling them a lot of things, right?
They kept telling me they needed my help, and so I kept trying to help.
Now, you remember on direct, Ms. Kappelman asked you about this interview.
Yeah.
Isn't that an interesting admission from Wendi? Wouldn't you think as a lawyer, someone familiar with these kind of situations, that you would know that you'd want to help? Unprompted? She was only so open and honest and gave so much of her time because the police asked her to help. Wouldn't you want to be as helpful as you can? Unprompted? She needs to be prompted for that? If the police hadn't asked, she wouldn't have been as helpful?
Yes.
And she asked you about all the people you mentioned during the interview, including Charlie.
Yes.
And you said I was just wheeling off names, right?
Yes.
In fact, isn't the first person in the interview that you mentioned was yourself?
Yes.
You said that you would understand if you were viewed as the prime suspect, right?
Yes.
Before you mentioned anyone else, you mentioned yourself.
Yes.
You told them about the motion to relocate.
I did.
You told them about the fight you had with Professor Markel that very morning about some swimming for the boys.
Yes.
You were spitting out a lot of ideas.
I was.
And you agreed to let the police search your phone.
Yes.
You agreed to let the police search your car.
Yes.
That's where they found that picture that I wasn't able to admit of the invitation to the Bull of Bourbon, right?
Yeah.
You agreed to be fingerprinted.
Yes.
You agreed to be checked for gunshot residue.
Yes.
You gave them your computer to be searched.
I did.
Yeah, she was so helpful that she hightailed it out of there and was never helpful again. So the language that I find so interesting that Wendi used in her police interview is when she's talking about someone else doing this for her. She said, well, maybe someone heard me complain about Dan and did this because, this is her language, they thought it was good. So I'm paraphrasing from memory, but I remember they thought it was good. So good being, there may have been a few filler words in there that have been different, but it's pretty close to, as I remember it, pretty close to what she said. Why wouldn't you say they thought it would please me or they thought I'd be happy with the results? But thought it was good. What a weird way to put it. What a vague and thought this was good. And To my mind, I find it very revealing of her own inner dialogue that this will be good for everyone involved, good for the children ultimately. They'll have the strong influence of their grandparents. They'll be raised in Miami. They'll whatever the rationalizations that she had or the thinking that she had, it all boils down to good.
Towards the end of your interview, you asked the police officer if you could call your parents, right?
I did.
And the police allowed you to do that.
Yes.
And you called your mother's cell phone sometime around 7:04 p.m.
Yes.
And you spoke to your mom. I don't know if you remember, but do you remember your dad being in the shower because they were going out to dinner?
I don't remember.
Your mom didn't answer actually the first call, and you called back a couple minutes later and she answered. Do you recall that?
I don't.
And when you called your mom, she was surprised.
Yes.
Well, that's Wendi reporting it to the police officer. Another thing I found very strange. She gets off the phone with her mother and she goes, well, that's good. My mother sounded surprised, so it's not her. Don't look there, officer. It is the most sus thing. And he's bringing that up? And he's not finessing it. I think he's making it worse.
And you asked her to call Charlie and tell him what happened, right?
Yes.
You didn't speak with Charlie that day, right?
I don't think so.
On July 19th, the next day, you spoke to Charlie at 10:50 in the morning. Is that, you won't know the exact time, but do you recall speaking with him in the morning?
I honestly don't.
Do you recall letting him know that Professor Markel had passed away in the early morning?
I don't remember the conversation.
When your parents came directly to Tallahassee, correct?
They did.
They stopped in Orlando and they got there on the morning of the 19th, right?
Yes.
And when they got there, they were scared and frantic, right?
Yes.
Your dad didn't sleep. He couldn't get police protection, so he planted his chair in the front of your window to make sure that no one was going to come to your house and shoot it up, right?
Correct.
Or he planted a chair in case the police came in and arrested them. That's another way of looking at it. Again, we don't know if any of this happens. This is all being told by an unreliable narrator.
Now, you all attended a memorial service on the 20th, right?
Yes.
And you arranged for the Markels to see the boys after the memorial service, right?
They all came over to my house.
And you left Tallahassee, correct?
Not on the 20th. No.
On the 21st.
Yes.
And when you left Tallahassee on the 21st, did you bring all your belongings?
I brought some swimsuits for the boys and some pajamas, and I thought we'd be back in a day or two.
And when you left, you were not yourself.
I was a mess.
You got to South Florida and you realized that you could not take care of the boys alone at this point in time.
I hadn't slept in days and I was terrified.
To get a little more specific, you wouldn't leave the house.
No.
And you
She, interestingly terrified even after the police assured her that whoever did this would not go after her or the boys. She was so terrified she had to do the thing she wanted to do all along, bring the kids to Miami and give the grandparents, her parents, unfettered access to her children. But she was a mess during the whole time, which I do believe. But I believe that she was a mess. And I believe most of the family were nervous about the police coming to talk to them, arrest them. They had no fear. They were paying these people off, paying for their vacations.
You would hardly eat.
I wasn't eating, no.
And ultimately, you decided not to come back to Tallahassee.
I mean, I made that decision much later, but
And you had a friend who you grew up with, I think last name Keener, go back and get more stuff at your house, right?
he did.
You have one more moment, Your Honor. Now,
did anyone just catch that look from Wendi? She looked over at her brother and looked like her eyes welled up with tears for a second there. And I really do think that she thinks that what her family did here was good. Because it was good for her and good for her family. And that's the only thing that matters to her.
it's been said in this courtroom that you have tried to erase Professor Markel's memory from your boy's life. Is that true?
It's not true.
Yeah, because she wanted to preserve their father's memory by changing their name almost to the date of his murder, a year to the date of his murder. A little bit earlier. She couldn't wait. What a terrible, disgusting thing to do. One of the few things they have left of their father. This enrages me. You know, someone who lost their father fairly young, got sick in my teenage years, and he was dead a month after my 20th birthday. I mean, you have such few things. And the name being one of the most important. And she takes that from them. I remember when Mia Farrow changed her children's names after the Woody Allen debacle. And family friend Dory Previn, who said, now they have nothing. Not even their name. And it's, of course, they still have their first name, a little different than Mia Farrow, but it's a similar kind of narcissistic decision.
For the first 2 years after the murder, did you limit Professor Markel's family from seeing the boys?
Absolutely not.
in fact, they had complete access to the boys, right?
100%.
They made dinners with the boys.
I cooked dinner for them, yes, every time they visited.
There were sleepovers and play dates.
That's right.
There was no animosity at all, right?
No.
And then in October of 2016, things changed, right?
Yes.
A letter was released where there was a suggestion that Professor Markel's mom was talking to the state about arranging custody for the boys in case you got arrested.
Yes.
And you saw that as a betrayal.
Well, the custody was foster care, so yes.
You saw that as her thinking that you killed her son.
Yes.
Shocking. And I interviewed Ruth Markel. You can find it. There's a playlist of all of my episodes about this case. And it was a heartbreaking interview. And that is a logical conclusion, but they're going to make it seem extreme and like she's a wild fantasist for thinking it. Who else knew Dan's schedule? And when you change the boy's last name, it lets everyone know how much you hated him. So I really think this was a mistake again.
And as a result of that, rightly or wrongly, you decided to limit their access.
I was afraid they were going to put my children in foster care.
Do your children know anything about their father?
They know a lot about their dad.
Do they have a picture of him in their bedroom?
Each boy has a picture of them and their dad over their bed that we say good morning to and good night to every day.
Did you benefit from Professor Markel's death?
No.
Well, you got to live in South Florida.
It's not a benefit.
How are your boys doing?
They're doing very well. Thank you.
How has your job prospects been since this case hit the news?
Objection, relevance.
So she's going to get that sustained. I thought those if he could have gotten those questions in, I thought they were good questions. Try to make the jury sympathetic, but that is a tall order to make Wendi look sympathetic.
How are you doing?
Objection, relevance.
Has this affected your life negatively or positively?
Negatively.
Really? Because the celebration dinner tells otherwise, but okay. And I'm sure it has affected her reputation negatively. That's what happens when you murder your ex-husband or you pay to have him murdered. Your reputation takes a little bit of a hit.
Does Charlie love his nephews?
Very much.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Okay, this is the moment I was thinking of where watch him put his hand over his mouth. He doesn't want anyone reading his lips.
Redirect examination.
All right, I'm going to take a little bit of a break before re-examination. Get some water, and I'll be back. Stay tuned. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. I really apologize for the length of this. Maybe I got hypnotized by Wendi myself. Thank you. If you've been listening since the beginning, thank you so much. If you're just tuning in, we are watching Wendi Adelson's testimony in her brother Charlie Adelson's trial for the murder of Wendi's ex-husband, Dan Markel. So we're on the home stretch here. This is a really good reexamination by Georgia Kappelman.
The long list of plans that you went over with Mr. Ashman that you were going to have in Tallahassee post murder date, none of those plans happened, right?
No,
Because you moved to South Florida, right?
because I felt unsafe to stay here, yes.
And did you feel safe in South Florida?
No,
Did you buy a house in Tallahassee after the murder?
no, I did not.
Did you rent a house in Tallahassee after the murder?
No, I didn't live in Tallahassee after the murder.
Did the boys go to school that fall here in Tallahassee?
No, all our plans were broken.
And what was the purpose of those questions? Of course you didn't. You moved to South Florida. You didn't have plans in Tallahassee that got executed. Why were you asked about all those things?
I don't know why I was asked questions by the defense counsel.
The book event that you were asked about, did that event happen?
I did.
So once again, these questions are really for the jury. It doesn't matter what Wendi says. Georgia Kappelman has gone up against Wendi in other trials. She knows what to expect. She knows she's not going to remember anything. She knows that she's going to have every exhibit, every bit of evidence at the ready because Wendi's going to ask to look at all of it. But she's going to go, if the defense scored any points, she's going to make sure that the jury knows. But when she uses the word executed, none of your plans were executed. She wants the jury to think about another execution that happened, that of Dan Markel. So it's a little play on words there, very clever with Georgia Kappelman. And just her attitude that she brings and passion, she wants the jury to know that her attitude towards Wendi's testimony is that it's ridiculous, which I believe is the appropriate attitude or the attitude a rational person would have towards this testimony.
I didn't speak at the event, but the event still happened.
Have you had several events related to that book that have happened?
I have.
And what events were those?
Do you mean just in Tallahassee or do you mean in other places?
Everywhere.
I've spoken at various schools about human trafficking and about my book. I think there was one event that still happened in Tallahassee about a year later.
And is that the only book you've written or have you written more than one book?
I've only written one book.
What was the book about?
The book was about human trafficking and about the vulnerabilities that lead to trafficking, the problems when it occurs, and basically how to recover from it after.
Where was the book set?
It was set in a fictional town.
What was the name of the fictional town?
Hiawassee Springs.
So Hiawassee. Is it located in the panhandle of Florida?
No, I used to see the name when I was driving from Tallahassee to Orlando, so it's somewhere in between.
And was the place modeled after Tallahassee?
It was definitely somewhere in Florida, but not supposed to be about Tallahassee, no.
Who was the central character in that book?
So there's three central characters. One was one of my clients, kind of a composite character from Eastern Europe. One was kind of a composite character of many clients I've represented from Latin America. And one was a public interest lawyer.
And was the public interest lawyer Lily?
Yes.
And is that the character that's sort of based after yourself?
No, really more based after a friend of mine.
Right, because she's going to disagree with anything that Georgia Kappelman argues here. Because, for one, I believe she enjoys it. I believe she gets a kick out of saying, you don't know. You don't know. You can't know. If I say it was based on a friend of mine, it was based on a friend of mine. If I say it wasn't based on Tallahassee, just some random place in Florida I've never lived, instead of the place that I lived in and despised, that makes it so. You couldn't know, Georgia Kappelman. It's so aggressive.
And was Hiawassee, Florida, quote, just a small stop on the way back to what we had previously known as civilization? Is that a quote from your book?
That sounds like a quote from my book, yeah.
And who's the husband of Lily, the public interest lawyer?
You want his name in the book?
Yes.
I think it was Josh Stone.
All right. And what was Josh's employment?
Josh was an English professor.
I'm sorry, what was your answer?
Josh was an English professor.
The name of the character was Stan Sharkel, and it was based on a friend of mine.
Professor, where did he teach?
It's been a while. I wrote the book over 10 years ago. I don't remember what I named the university in the
North Florida State University.
That sounds right.
NFSU.
NFSU sounds right. Yeah.
All right. And in the book, does Lily lament, quote, we moved to this godforsaken place for Josh's career?
Yes, that sounds like a line Lily would say.
All right. When you looked at page...
Lily, my friend Lily, this is so ridiculous, but why Wendi wrote, toured with her book, did a podcast. It was her innocence fraud campaign that she was touting out. She wanted to get her side of the story because she's the one closest to the story. And she wants to control the narrative. So she's putting out as much stuff as she can. The interesting thing about her podcast is not only did she imitate the language of a kind of NPR, This American Life, but podcast, but she imitates the cadence of an NPR podcast. Listen to her podcast and compare it to something like This American Life or Serial, and it's exact. And it supports my theory that she lives her life by imitation, by imitating and getting the props of a good person, the working with trafficked women, working in immigration law, helping students, and with the appearance, very, very coiffed appearance. And of course, her father liked to touch up her pictures, and Jeff Lacoste picked out that she changed the picture on her Facebook page the night before the murder to this very photoshopped glamour shot of her and the kids. So if she didn't want her kids out there and she knew about it, it would seem odd to put a picture of herself and her kids, but it was very important to telegraph that she was a loving, attractive, dedicated mom. That's what the story she wanted to tell in her Facebook posts and her podcast.
Page 187 of the divorce document on Cross, and I'll hand that back to you. This is actually my copy. just turn back to 187. Do you see the quote that you read previously from that page?
I don't.
It had to do with, let's see if I can find it. That you were very unhappy in the marriage. I think it's the third paragraph there.
I see that line.
Okay, the wife has been very unhappy in the marriage and files her petition for dissolution of marriage in August 2012. The husband continues to characterize this as abandonment, and then it goes on to say that he had been disparaging you to some of the folks at the law school. Do you remember reading that?
I do.
Was that intended to be the place in this binder where you allege emotional abuse by your husband?
I mean, I think it's emotionally abusive to suggest somebody has mental health issues.
Okay.
I wonder if she would feel that way if so it's a like if you're married to a schizophrenic or some other kind of really serious mental health issue, it's abusive to point it out. This is absurd. This whole abusive thing, I'm just not buying. Certainly, I'm sure Dan Markel was a very accomplished, ambitious man, incredibly intelligent. I'm sure at times he was difficult, very focused, but abuse is a whole different kettle of fish, and I've seen none of that in the evidence in this trial. And she's the only one who says it, who's not a friend of hers who's hearing it from her.
What is the prof's blog? You were asked about that on Cross.
Yeah, it was a blog that Danny started with some of his colleagues to kind of promote community in the law professor world.
And who reads the prof's?
Probably
Prof's blog?
other law professors and people interested in becoming law professors.
Who is on the Crim Prof listserv?
I don't know.
Were you on the listserv for that prof's blog?
I may have been on the listserv at some point.
Do you remember seeing the post that you were shown on Cross?
I do.
And the post says something about Danny and I are planning to attend a conference that will begin Sunday, July 20th. Is there any other information on what you were shown about Dan's travel plans post-murder other than that?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
The post says Danny and I guess it's another professor writing this thing. Danny and I are planning to attend a conference that will begin Sunday, July 20th. Is that the type of information that he would typically have on something like the prof's blog or Facebook?
That sounds right.
Okay, but as far as the date he's leaving, the flight he's on, that kind of stuff, would that typically be on the prof's blog?
He wouldn't put what flight number he was on, but he would almost always communicate when he was going on a trip.
Okay, so going to a conference that starts July 20th might be an example.
Flying to New
I would ask, is Fredo Garcia subscribed to the prof's blog? Is Luis Rivera on the prof's blog? Is Katie on the prof's blog? Are they reading it? I mean, that would have just taken a little air out of the defense's sails there. But at this point, they were in such good shape. It really wasn't needed, but that would have been a fun question to ask.
New York tomorrow would be an example,
But
not,
he didn't
not
put
a flight number.
But he didn't put flying to New York tomorrow on this occasion?
No.
You were referenced several times, not on direct examination by the state, but by your brother's attorney on cross as a co-conspirator. Are you charged in this case?
No.
This isn't your trial, is it?
No.
Is your brother charged with conspiring with you to do a murder?
No.
Is he charged with conspiring with you to plan a murder?
No.
Is he charged with soliciting you to do a murder?
No.
Who is he charged with doing those things with?
I don't think anyone.
Have you had an opportunity to review his indictment in this case?
I have not.
Give you an opportunity to take a look at that document yourself.
Yeah, Ruth Markel looks venomous at that moment. It's such a offensive lie that she doesn't know who Charlie is charged with doing this crime with. It's so offensive.
Who is your brother alleged to have done these crimes with?
Catherine D. Magbanawa.
Were you on the wire in this case, Ms. Adelson?
No.
So when the bump happened, are you familiar with the event I'm referencing as the bump?
I am now.
When law enforcement approached your mother on the street and handed her a piece of paper?
Yes.
Okay. When that occurred, who did your mother call?
I don't know.
Not you, right?
Not me.
Okay. And once your brother found out about the bump, did he call you about it?
No.
Who did he call?
I don't know.
Well, you listened to the calls to authenticate the voices, didn't you?
Just to hear the voices, not to hear the content of the calls.
Okay. And the voices were your brother's voice, right?
But I listened to the calls just to hear who was on them, so I don't know what content they're referencing.
I heard your answer. My question to you now is your brother's voice was on the calls.
He was on some of the calls I listened to.
Your mother's voice was on the calls.
She was.
Why wasn't she listening to the calls? If your ex-husband was murdered, wouldn't you want to know everything, even if only to help your brother prepare for a defense? Wouldn't you want to listen to everything? But now she's Gene Hackman in the conversation and she's such a professional. What is she listening for? The quality of the audio? These answers are really hard to believe. Once again, outrageous.
It was on some of the calls I listened to.
Did you have any secret meetings with your brother post bump that happened in South Florida?
No.
You were asked about Jeffrey Lacasse and the way that your relationship ended. What is OkCupid?
OkCupid is a dating website.
Were you on that dating website?
I was.
Were you on that dating website at the time that you were dating Mr. Lacasse?
No, I wasn't.
And were you speaking? So I guess if you weren't on it, you weren't speaking to multiple men from the website during the time you were dating Mr. Lacasse. And I'll remind you that you provided your phone in this case and it was cell-brighted, downloaded.
Objection. Argument.
Didn't you just...
So isn't that interesting? It looked like for a moment there, you could see Wendi deciding whether to commit to her lie that she wasn't on dating apps and dating multiple men or contacting multiple men. You could kind of see her eyes narrow for a second. She's unsure, but it doesn't matter what her answers are or how much she denies it. George has already telegraphed to the jury that that's what happened.
Say that you weren't on OkCupid at the time that you were dating Jeffrey Lacasse?
I don't know when we say I officially stopped dating Jeff Lacasse, but there's a chance that, I don't remember in 2014 whether I had gotten the app and started talking to people before we officially broke up.
Okay, so my point is there's a chance that he was right. You were being unfaithful or at least talking to other people. He had a reason to be jealous.
I think he had some serious jealousy issues that may or may not have been founded.
Yeah, I think.
Right. It's Jeff Lacasse's personality problem, not my massive infidelity problem. Look how self-satisfied she looks with that answer.
I think we got from your testimony that you believe he had serious jealousy issues. My question to you is, did he have a reason to be?
No.
So he was wrong.
He was wrong in June when he accused me of being with multiple people that I wasn't with. Yes.
Okay.
Sounds like there she's just saying he picked the wrong people. He's brought up some of the wrong people. Didn't know quite all their names.
What was wrong with Dan's mother trying to make arrangements for the kids in the event of your arrest? Wasn't that a kind thing to do?
I don't think it's kind to put my children in foster care.
Wasn't the foster care intended only to cover the time frame that it would take for her to get on a plane and get here?
She never said that.
You thought she was just going to leave them in foster care?
I didn't know what to think. They have a mother. They don't need to be in foster care.
But they wouldn't have a mother in the event of your arrest, Ms. Adelson. Wasn't that the intention of the email?
I don't know what the intent of the email was. I was not going to be arrested for a crime I didn't commit.
She didn't know.
Really? As a lawyer, you don't think that's possible? Aren't you at a trial? Aren't you testifying at a trial of your brother who you think is falsely accused of this crime? So it's so improbable to think that you'd be falsely accused of this crime and falsely indicted and maybe even falsely convicted or wrongfully convicted? Wouldn't Charlie's trial, I mean, as she's sitting there, she still thinks that this is absurd.
Know that though, did she?
I don't know what she knows or doesn't know. I can't speak to that.
Do Dan's parents know whether you committed this crime or not?
I don't know how to answer that question.
How would they? Particularly back at the time that she sent that email. It was fresh at that time, right?
I'm sorry, what was fresh?
All the events that were occurring, the arrests.
That was 2 years after Danny's murder. I don't know what she knew or didn't know. I know that my children don't belong in foster care.
Was it a specific foster care that she was requesting be called in the event that the children had no place to go and were going to be going into the custody of the state?
She did suggest a specific foster care agency.
A Jewish-run foster care agency.
A Jewish foster care.
Okay, I'm going to leave it here for tonight. We're going almost on 3 hours. If you have listened to this stream with me, thank you so much. To the entire thing, I appreciate it. To everyone who listened and left comments on the last episode, thank you. Please subscribe, hit the thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm. It helps this channel. And I will see you back here next time. Have a great night, everybody.